Child and Woman and the creative reflections that follow in this episode and subsequent episodes are artistic expressions, not clinical interpretations. Nothing in this series is meant to diagnose, treat, or offer therapeutic instruction. If anything in these conversations touches a tender part of your story, please consider connecting with a qualified mental health professional, a trusted support person, or a trauma-informed practitioner. Your well-being matters, and you don't have to navigate any of this alone. This episode may include personal reflections on trauma, including experiences of sexual harm, family dysfunction, and emotional abandonment. There are no graphic details, but the themes may still feel activating or tender. Please listen in a way that feels safe for your body and your story. You can pause, step away, or return later. Your well-being comes first. Welcome to the Lori Clarke Show. I am your host, Lori Clarke, and I am here with episode 99, part 5 of the Shame Out Loud series, Child and Woman. What happens when you stop telling a neat and tidy story about what hurt you and start telling the true one? In part 5 of the Shame Out Loud series, I sit down with co-host Tammy Valicenti and a guest at our round table, Annie Trainor, for a conversation about child and woman. Alongside each episode, I have created curious writing companions, journal-style prompts, and as you know by now, if you've been listening, I don't really like the word journal, so I use something else because I like curiosity. And when I write, I want to be curious about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what I read on the paper. Oftentimes, I will write something and then go, what, I think that way? And then I want to be curious about why I did that. So I've called them curious writing companions that help you notice what stirs in you as you listen. I want to give you a little summary of the reading Child and Woman, so it's fresh in your memory. And as you've probably noticed, I add onto it with every episode. And so it's kind of fun. But you can sit and allow yourself to hear the words, and maybe they land differently for you today. Child and Woman begins before plot and explanation. It begins with a divide. There is a girl, and there is a moment that splits her world in two. One part of her stands in the light trying to understand what happened, and another part steps toward the dark because the truth feels unbearable. Between them is a trembling threshold like a witness forming in real time. The piece places this personal moment inside something bigger. Generations of women have carried secrecy. Generations of men have carried secrecy, with stories that were not believed. It names how violation can arrive swiftly and without warning, crossing a sacred boundary. It also names that this harm isn't limited by gender or age. Women and men, young and grown, you, me, us, we, all with a story. Then the writing narrows into the bathroom scene, the girl's crying, trying to catch her breath. She pinches her own skin and feels nothing. Her body has gone numb. She strains to hear her heartbeat, but all she can hear is ringing. An endless hum that drowns out everything else. Every muscle tightens as if gripping the memory could keep it from destroying her. Dissociation arrives as distance and quiet slipping away. In the mirror, there are two versions of her at once, the girl at the sink and the girl in the glass. Water rushes from the faucet, loud and urgent, like it might carry the feelings away. She reaches toward the reflection, but she can't touch her. That's the first moment she understands. There is now something thick between her and the beauty of who she was. The girl in the mirror speaks, soft as a vow. I'm okay. Her body betrays the lie. She shakes, shivers, tremors rolling through a frame that can't hold what just happened. The witness, the self that stays, knows the truth. The body isn't releasing, it's absorbing. Release will come later, much later. Then the mirror changes again. The reflection turns her head, and behind her a path appears, not smooth, not welcoming, a road of stones leading into dense forest. The girl at the sink panics, pleading across the glass for her not to go. The reflection answers with clarity that sounds like relief. I'd rather go into this darkness than stay in the light of what I had just experienced. And just like that, the rules settle into place. One becomes a witness, the other disappears into the forest. Decades pass inside the logic of this piece, even as the scene stays close. The witness has waited for the girl. When moment finally comes, it's subtle at first, rustling branches, a flicker of color against the blackness of the thick forest. The girl emerges, disheveled and thirsty, stumbling out of the dark with her eyes still closed. She has learned to rely on hearing and inner sight after walking for years without light. As she steps forward, she notices the ground has changed. It feels soft and spongy, not rocky. Her feet feel held. She speaks aloud, almost surprised. This will take some getting used to. Light grows. Her eyes adjust. She sees what looks like a pool of water and kneels to drink, hands cupped, and then she freezes. In the water, she sees a woman. The woman is older, disheveled, with long hair and fine lines around her eyes, deeper ones across her forehead. Her eyes are warm and inviting. The girl recoils, gasping, then leans in again, trying to make sense of what she's seeing. The water ripples. The face shimmers. She tests the reflection the way a child might test reality. A tongue stuck out, a blink, a touch to the forehead. The woman mirrors her exactly. Then comes a detail that makes denial harder. The scar is the same scar, the one the girl got when a neighborhood boy hurled a rock so hard it embedded beneath her skin. Something long, dormant flickers inside her, described as an ember, releasing colors. Blue, white, red, black, yellow, green, brown. Awareness rises like a flame. They are the same. Child and woman. Welcome to episode 99, part 5. And I'm welcoming a new guest at the round table today. Annie Trainor is an independent clinical social worker based in Massachusetts with over a decade of experience in community mental health. Her work has centered on supporting at-risk youth, young people in foster care, and families impacted by domestic violence and community violence and incarceration. Through this work, Annie has developed a deep understanding of the complex systems individuals and families navigate within the United States. Last year, Annie left her role serving youth in the foster care system to build her own private practice, and she works from a client-centered, anti-oppressive, and humanistic lens, utilizing EMDR and internal family systems while integrating somatic approaches and spiritual practices into her clinical work. Annie is committed to sharing the tools, spirituality, and healing practices that support her so others can access the same sense of possibility and care. So I welcome Annie to the table and welcome back my co-host, Tammy Valicenti. Here is episode 99, part 5. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Annie, thank you for being here. Tammy, thank you for joining me again. I'm loving this process. I think this is the coolest thing that we get to talk and we're all in different places and we get to share the beauty of our stories together. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for
Happy to be
having me.
here.
Annie, do you want to introduce yourself just briefly and give everybody a small update?
Yeah, so I'm Annie Trainor. I am a therapist and a clinical social worker, and also a human. So I'm on my own journey, kind of alongside working with young people on their journeys and beyond.
Mm,
Um, so I'm really happy to be here and kind of talk a little bit about what both my professional and kind of personal journey have taught me about myself.
mm.
And
How did the reading show up for you? What did you feel? What did you think as you read the writing Child and Woman?
Well, first, I want to say, like, very brave of you to kind of put that all on paper and share it with people. I think it definitely did resonate in a lot of aspects. And um, I do have a sexual assault kind of history of my own. And it's something that I think for a long time I haven't really sat with it for myself because of my own kind of processing and my own. Um, Kind of worrying about other people and less about self, and
Right.
kind of like how it impacted other people rather than how it impacted me. And I think when you speak about self, that's what really comes up for me quite a bit. Um, and just how my community also kind of looked at me in that time, right? And I was young, and I've had a few different experiences. And something I'm also unpacking is that we sometimes the lesson happens more than once before we learn it. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, so I think that's kind of
Hmm.
a big part of what resonated with me was just kind of your bravery, and it helped me want to be more brave about kind of my own experience of life and
Mm.
all of those things.
Hmm. Well, thank you. I did not feel brave in the beginning. It took me a long time, like yourself. I had multiple experiences as well, and it was very difficult for me to pull apart this idea that and I maybe it's not an idea, it was a belief that set inside of me that I had to please other people in order to keep myself safe.
I was thinking about self-blame and how that
Mm,
becomes, for a lot of us, our forest, and how we take on um, the negative attributes in part of the active alcoholic or the abuser or the rapist as our own, as a way of feeling some control or some safety or trying to figure it out, and that becomes the forest that parts of self get lost in,
mm,
and there's another piece to it that, that it becomes this kind of murky, mired in shame experience that, as you so beautifully talk about in your writing, Lori, is, profoundly difficult to navigate out of. And even when we maybe touch into that part, which I'd love to get into a little further in this
Mm,
episode, when we make contact with that part that's been hidden in the forest or dissociated off for so long, it can be a deeply profound, and overwhelming emotionally experience. As you talked about in your writing, Lori, that the
mm,
moment and then, oops, she disappears, right? It's a little too much. She just for a moment, and then there she goes.
yeah.
Um, I know I said a lot and all of that, so if either one of you wanna react to any of that, I'm all
Well, I'm writing
ears.
it all down.
Yeah.
I think
Um,
I kind of want to build off of it, kind of based upon your question earlier, Lori, too.
Mm,
And thank you, Tammy, because Tammy always has a way of like
I know.
summarizing things that make such good sense in my brain,
Beautiful.
such great sense.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, part of what I've noticed for myself as well is that um, I couldn't even really say that I had had that experience, even though it happened multiple times. Also, again, because I was worried about other people, but also I think for me, I, as a child, also learned to rationalize like other people's behavior. And so for me, it's always like, well, that person who did that to me must have also been hurting.
Yep.
And so then when I do that, I neglect what maybe has actually been my experience. Um, in doing that. And so I think for me, part of my forest per se, right, is kind of like listening to myself, honoring myself in those experiences, um, in order to get closer to what feels true to me.
Mm, that really resonates with me. I especially the part where you say, um, that you would rationalize that person who harmed me must have been hurting too, which is why, they did this. I I think it was a couple days ago, I actually said those words. And when I said them, they didn't feel right to me.
Mm,
And I'm and I know for sure, even in personal episodes, solo episodes on my show, I've said those words. I've said, well, those people did it because they're hurting and they didn't know any better. We say these things a lot. And this is really some spot, Tammy, for you to kind of weigh in here because, this just shows how many levels and ways this journey of unspooling yourself, unlocking different truths. It comes out in these ways that we just say it. We just say, "Oh, well, they must have been hurting." And in some way that passes their behavior as because what I really want to say now is they were evil. They were evil. And that intention cannot be passed off anymore. Because Annie, thank you for sharing because it was 2 days ago I said it. I didn't mean it back then, and today it's hit me differently, and
mm.
all of a sudden, this warrior queen comes up and goes, excuse meo, we're not playing that game anymore."
Yes. I mean, I think I would go a little further and say, yes, I mean, all of these things are true. And what hmm, what is it that happened to that person
Mhm,
that would then allow or what is it in our culture that allows that? I mean, those are good questions, I think. And I think compassion can lead us to to understanding, to processing, to healing, but not necessarily maybe in the beginnings of healing. Maybe what's really important is the rage and the evil and all of that. And maybe it's all really important. I think it's all really important. Um, but that's not to dismiss it. It's maybe to understand it, but still to hold someone accountable because as an adult, those people had the ability to choose something different, to do their own healing, to do
mhm.
their own work. And there's no excuses.
There's no excuses.
There's no excuses.
So,
Yeah.
Annie, do you want to respond to that just in terms of what you feel when you hear that?
Mhm.
Yes, but I could also go on forever, so
Oh,
please
go,
interrupt
go.
me
This is your
whenever.
time, please.
So I think it is important to share a little bit about kind of my work experience because I think it has helped me understand this concept. So Lori, I don't know if you know this about me, but I worked out of a police station in Boston for 2 years, giving care to children and families who came into contact with juvenile justice system. And what I learned in working with both perpetrators and victims was that a lot of the stories were very similar. A lot of the stories were a lot closer together than what I had ever imagined in my mind, or what I saw on the news, or what I experienced in life myself. And it was really quite liberating for me in a way because in order to see somebody else in their pain, it actually was healing for me. Like when I think about my situations of sexual assault, right? Um, and it also led me to grapple with this whole idea of actually being able to do the work for me, and I'm speaking for self, feels like a privilege. Um, Being
Uh-huh.
able to have the brain that I have, that I can work through the things, that I can give back to myself, that I can receive people like Tammy and her wisdom and you and your wisdom, right? Like that is what I think is part of it. And again, not to negate the harm that's caused, but more for me, it's what helped me have a greater understanding. of kind of my lived experience. And somebody who I talk about all the time, Gregory Boyle, is like my role model. One of a quotes that keeps coming up in this conversation for me right now is that we are so much more than the worst thing we've ever done.
Ooh, beautiful, Annie.
Yeah.
We are so much more than the worst thing we've ever done.
hmm And for me, if I'm being transparent, my lived experience and what happened to me, right? Then my response of that trauma did harm on others, right? Because of just what happened. And I think there's levels to it, right? I wasn't going around and necessarily doing the same thing to others that was done to me, but there were other ways in which that was impacting my life, and still does, right? And until I was able to see people in a different light, even when they do these really awful, horrible things, because now I feel like I can live with it and I can say it rather than feel like um, it's not my truth. Like, 2
Hmm.
things can exist at once. I can have empathy for someone doing harm,
Yep.
and I can also be harmed by them, and that can be my truth, and those things can be coexisting at the same time.
Well,
And
it's
the
beautiful.
truth, then would you say that the truth also is that out of your own pain of those experiences, that you are acting a certain way that could impact and harm other people in different ways. Maybe it's attitude or it's protection or it's trust. It's not letting
Mhm.
people in. It's not believing people when they say who they are because you're ready to fight to the death for your own safety. Is that kind of how that shows up for you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I think also, just a lot of, self-belief, I think, is a big thing, and a lot and it makes it sound kind of like it's easy. I'm not I'm not trying to say that, like, I just woke up one day and was like, I'm gonna believe in a certain way. It ebbs and flows, and, I think in a lot of work that I've done professionally, personally, with Tammy in both realms, I think has really led me to just view it in a different way, and including also a lot of the work of the person I just quoted, I think has
Sure.
also really, opened my mind, and I think that if we all were able to sit in a room like this, right, the people who do harm and don't do harm and our victims and our perpetrators, we would actually have a much more healed place, right? Because I think it does feel like a privilege to be able to talk about it, to have the space, to feel safe enough um, to own it.
Can you just speak to the victim perpetrator piece
Mm,
for a little more clarity in terms
yeah,
of what did you discover there? So when you're speaking about this, could you share a few really key insights that could help us?
totally. Hmm. There's just so many examples that it's hard to really kind of think about it. Um, and also to be delicate about storytelling of
Of
kind of my
course.
experience also, which is just a new thing to me. Um,
Hmm,
yes, I'm trying to think. There's a really good story I want to tell, but I'm just trying to like listen to myself if it feels
sure.
like a good choice.
Yeah,
Um,
which I love, by the way.
thank you. I'm trying. Um, I mean, theme-based way to say it is that like, but I've already said it, is that really the stories are the same, right? And so the biggest thing th that I would catch people in my experience, like, I
Yes.
would get their attention quickly, is I would go in front of these kids who and when I say, like, it was pretty intense,
Yep.
I had young kids carrying around guns in the city, and I would, go into their homes and speak with them and talk to them and try to help them make different choices, not better or worse, I always say, just different.
Different.
Um and I'll never forget that my biggest catchphrase would be, um, "If you felt safe, you wouldn't be walking around with a gun." So if
Huh.
the people that are in power to protect you, right, in our society, were making you feel safe, whether that's your family, whether that's, bigger things bigger than that, right? You
Mhm.
wouldn't feel the need to be a 13-year-old who can't walk to school without a weapon. And so but the way that society looks at that 13-year-old who's carrying a weapon, right, is they should be in jail, they are bad.
Sure.
But really no kid, not in my experience, right? And now I work in a residential group home, so I have similar population, young people that I'm working with in ways. Nobody wakes up one day and says, "Hey, I'm
No.
gonna go get a gun and carry it around the neighborhood, and I'm gonna get in this situation that's gonna really harm me and everybody else involved," right? And so I think once I understood that, it
Mm.
freed up a lot of the fear that a lot of us walk around in. I mean, my grandmother was a probation officer her whole life, and she said, "Why aren't you carrying mace? Why aren't you carrying pepper spray?" And I was like, because I don't there's nobody's trying to harm me, like, I am here to
Mm.
support the community, right? And I never had it sounds crazy, but I never had an incident that
Mm.
made me feel unsafe. I actually loved the community. I loved being with the clients that I worked with. I saw, in a way, a lot of myself in them, and the
Mm.
biggest thing that separated us was the privileges that I was given in life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
What
That's
you're
that.
saying is hurt people, and
Right.
traumatize people.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
It's perpetuated.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm. I'm
Yeah.
struck by in a lot of what we're saying is there's really no, right path to finding your way out of the forest. There's no right path to healing. What
No.
works for you, Lori, looks very different for Annie, which
Yep.
looks very different for me.
That's right.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's that holding those things together and realizing that we've all, like, in our pain, everyone harms someone else if it's unresolved.
Right.
And I think that's the point. We're creating the conversation so that anybody with pain, it doesn't matter where or what has happened, if 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 you feel like you are disconnected from who you are supposed to be in this world, then that disconnection creates all kinds of barriers to entry for people. So it
Mhm.
could be you have, you don't feel safe. So what you said is if you felt safe, you wouldn't be walking around, and for me, it would be, trying to protect your heart.
Mm.
If I felt safe, it wouldn't be that I would have to outsmart someone in order to feel safe.
Mhm.
It wouldn't be, hurt them before so that I can see. It wouldn't be using hypervigilance as my guardian so that I can be, which holds me in a survivor mode that continues this cycle and I just keep reliving over and over again. I mean,
Exactly.
these are ways in which
Mhm.
we don't know that we're actually, um, being.
No.
It's quite profound.
And also, like, what you just said made something click in my brain. Like,
Yeah,
when you said the thing about protecting your heart, right? And so I had, in a way, a privilege of seeing it on a level that was so clear, right? Because it's a weapon, right? It's like an external force
Mhm.
item of that feeling,
yeah,
right? That there was access to. And so I think that is really, like, that was really fascinating for me to kind of have that all work through
yeah.
with you, Lori. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and for me, it's the catastrophizing. So I move quick to catastrophize. Like, I can go to I should be somewhere where they need someone to support them with what could happen that would be like the end of the world. Because I could totally do that and go really quickly to that because, um, I don't know where this fits, but after I wrote this, so this was I hadn't had any somatic therapy yet when I wrote this. And then after I read it back to myself, I went, okay, well, I better go get some help here. So when I started working with internal family systems, I started seeing this this part of myself. And it was this young woman, and she was really thin, like adolescent. She had tape over her mouth. And in my mind's eye, that's how I saw myself.
Mm.
And and as an adult woman having 4 kids, a marriage that's lasted almost 30 years, I'm thinking, "That can't be real. Where's the tape? Where's the tape over my mouth?" Only to realize, um, I don't use words to protect myself. I use all of my clairvoyant senses.
Mm,
I will use other things to ensure that growing up in the forest, which was dark to me, it was completely black in there. I had to use other things to navigate and to sustain myself.
Yes, you were silenced, literally
Yes.
tape on your mouth. No surprise you're sitting here doing Shame Out Loud with us. It's so beautiful. You can't
mhm.
make this up.
No,
Yes.
you can't.
Yes. How many of us were silenced and in what ways?
Oh, yeah.
And is that I feel like that's always part of, the forest we get lost in.
I think that's a really good question.
Mhm.
Tammy, can you answer that question for yourself? And then Annie, will move to you and then I can share. But how were you silenced and in what ways?
Oh, she's in so many ways. I, um, I literally could not be myself. And
Right.
how is that even told to me? I mean, some of it was overt for sure, how I could dress, what I ate, um, where I would go to college, who my friends were. And a lot of it, I think, was covert as well. All the things that aren't said that lead to the message, like, you don't talk about this, you don't confront this, you don't use your voice to tell the truth and what's going on in front of you. And even if you
Mm,
did, for me, um, I would be overused word, but I would be gaslit and told, like, that's not what's happening. Um, into my 40s, my mother was saying, "Was your father really an alcoholic?" What? What? Are you denying my entire experience as a child?
Mm,
She has her own journey, I understand that.
yeah. Right.
But in so many ways, it was countless and it was every day, and I'm
Wow.
sure a lot of people can relate to that.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I think for me, it's sometimes I still feel that way, and maybe that's part of my forest, right?
Yeah.
And something that I learned is that I was really good at talking with other people about maybe something similar that they'd been through that had nothing to do with me. And I think in doing that, I then realized that like there's actually more power in actually kind of sharing and not being silent. Um, in addition to just the fear of not being silent, I think is something that I'm still working with.
Mm,
Um, and not having it come out the way that I want it to is what has also kept me silent.
mhm.
Is like,
Hmm.
again, back to that same thing I was talking in the beginning, worry of other people's feelings and not so much of my own, I think is what continues sometimes in a lot of ways to keep me quiet.
Yeah.
Uh,
I I appreciate both of those reflections because for me, I was told I wasn't believable.
mm,
So when I told at 12 years old, it was the worst thing I've ever done because I had people saying to me, um, "You're not believable." And then when this person said to me um, about the person that I had named as the abuser, they said, "Look at what you've done to our family. Now, if this gets out, they will go to jail." And I was just like, I had no ability to deal with that, and no one picked it up. And so what would happen is, um, everybody would be in community with that person,
mhm.
and I was excluded. And it was just like my voice created unworthiness, zero belonging,
Yes,
and secrecy that was such a consequence to me that I didn't trust my own voice.
that makes sense. and to turn it around that it's your fault that person would go to jail, not
Yeah,
that
Yes.
person's actions that led or would possibly lead them to go to jail.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
for me, the way that I'm thinking about it right now is in what we've just talked about, taking it even further too of like because I think we just don't do this enough in society, but like what led that person to do that? And I'm not excusing the behavior. I always say
no,
it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. But I think if we looked at it from that lens, there would actually be more like holistic healing, if that makes sense, because
yeah.
then people wouldn't be like, "Oh, it's just gonna ruin their life." It would be like, "No, there's something that's happened to you that means you need to take responsibility for how that has then impacted other people." Does that resonate?
It does resonate. And Tammy, can you share with us how that's different? What Annie just said is
Mhm.
different than saying, "Oh, that person is hurting. That's why they harmed me." So what's the difference between what Annie just said and this thing that we or this way we bypass?
Yeah.
Oh, if I can actually just I have an
Oh, yeah, keep
idea
going.
for it.
Yeah.
I think it's about responsibility, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's like, um I did harm, like, right? So, like, something happened to somebody, right? And then we
Yeah.
address the person who did the harm. What we do when we do that typically, right, is you're bad. You deserve to have a punishment. And people many times do. I'm not saying that they don't. But
Yep.
what I'm saying is we'd actually get further if we said, what led this person to do that? Because in my experience, I've learned, right, that a lot of it's like a wheel, right? Victim become perpetrator, perpetrator become victim, two different levels. Again, I'm not I'm not excusing behavior, but it's just been a different way of for me to understand where there can be true healing, where then, Lori, you can speak out and not feel like you're losing something, right? Because because especially sexual assault is a taboo, right? It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to talk about where it came from because likely it's because something else, right, could have happened. And so then we get in this hamster wheel, is kind of my experience. Um, and then
Hmm.
it takes away from everybody, right? And including the person who did harm and the person who was harmed.
So the explanation allows for, accountability and responsibility
Yes.
in a way.
God, that's I wasn't anticipating this going this way.
I love that. I love
And
it.
I
I hope it's
love it.
okay.
Like, I'm like, "Well,
So
there
good.
goes the notes."
I love it.
Because honestly, this is exactly what we need.
Mhm.
When we can come to the table and we can say, we don't have to say what happened to us. Like, we don't have to retread. I believe you, Annie. I
Mhm.
believe myself. I believe
Mhm.
Tammy.
Mhm.
In this moment, we get to say, um, I I know what happened to me, and I trust that this is going to become something for me. How this is going to end up, I trust there's healing for me. How did you trust that you were going to find connection again? How
Mm.
did that work?
I mean, I could say for myself, I didn't trust anything. I didn't trust
Me
anyone or
either.
anyone. I mean, I anything or anyone, I couldn't. And 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 to And to go back just to talk about for 1 minute the connection also to vulnerability, that I could not allow myself to be vulnerable. That's how I got through. And then in order to have connection, I'd have to be vulnerable. It that whole navigation of all of that was messy and
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I had no idea, talk about being lost in that forest. I had no idea where I was going or how to get out. And connection and emotional intimacy, I didn't have the roadmap, and it absolutely terrified me.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it is in full transparency still something that I battle with is trust of self, of environment, of everything. And I think things that have led me to be able to trust more is that I've noticed, and Tammy's an example of this in meeting her, is when I've been myself, when I've been able to pull those pieces out of myself, really good things have happened, things that have never happened for me before.
Hmm.
And that keeps me going, that keeps me having hope that I am worthy, that I am okay, that I can heal, right? Um and that I can also spread that to other people and kind of lift other people up to believe in themselves. I think having someone believe in you, you know, being your authentic self. What's really interesting about my story is I do find that the biggest place I found it was in first in babysitting children,
Mm.
spending time with young kids. I always felt like if I just gave them love, care, and affection and goofed off a little now and then, right? And was vulnerable in a way, that they would give that back to me. And it actually was very healing for me as a babysitter and spending time with kids. And modeling vulnerability, I think, is another thing. When I used to work at the group home, I would drive and sing songs in the car on the top of my lungs.
Yep.
And then it was, years later in school, I learned from like this, profound trauma trainer that that's actually a way to model vulnerability. And I was doing it when I was 18, driving the kids around. And then they'd open up to me more, right? Because they saw that I was a human. And I think humanizing myself has helped me feel like I can be a human in other spaces.
Ooh.
Beautiful. I think you're mirroring what I've seen in a lot of clients and in myself, the connection with animals and children
Mm,
first. Because I also had the same experience of taking care of families and young children um and coming into the fold of that family and being loved and seen. Um I think we find our surrogates in some ways
mhm.
in the more vulnerable and maybe find our own vulnerabilities there to be able to begin to trust.
Wow.
Yeah,
For
those that
me,
carry us.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I resonate with both those because I have 4 children.
Mhm.
They're now adults. Well, Sally's 15, but it was at first I was an early child educator and was daycare and all those different things, and it was the same piece. It was this freedom of vulnerability and, um and in some ways, I would say it was almost treating myself the way I would wanna have been treated, and
Mm,
as a mother, I know my kids talk about me that way. Like, we have a very close relationship, and they're out of the house, they're doing all their things, but the thing that I chose to model was that living out loud living my and of course, never giving more than they needed in terms of, information, um, but it was also just being vulnerable when
Mhm.
when I was yelling at them, coming back around and making the repair. I think that was the piece is I didn't get any repair
Mhm.
in my life. Had we all gotten a measure of just a word, a sentence of repair, I do believe there would have been some, uh, softening for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm,
Amen. Absolutely. Connection. I mean, repair is that
mhm.
connection. Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, this has been wonderful. We are going to bring Petra on, and she is going to have some time to share with us what the writing meant to her and her personal experience with the forest. And then we will jump into conversation together um, and talk as a group. So let's get ready for her
I
in
can't
this
wait to
next
see where
step.
it takes us.
Sounds great.
Keep the notes or throw them out.
What?
Mhm.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
It's beautiful. So if you need a break, you could take one. But Annie, thank you so much. That was beautiful and
Oh, thank you.
it's just glorious. This whole thing is beautiful to me.
Thank
It
you.
is. You guys did
I didn't
great.
know I was
Thank
going
you.
there either, by the way. I just went with where you guys kinda went and what felt
Ye
right, so
Yeah, I mean, I have trust, community, and truth kind of written
Mm,
down. But what I marvel at is we had two other people, Karina
okay.
Goff and Dr. Lara Barbier on, and each of us talked about these different things. And then I thought to myself this morning, well, how is this going to work? Where do I steer it so that it
Together,
goes
yeah.
together? And I was sitting in silence, and this thought came in my head and said, we'd like you to stop now. Go clean the house.
I
Well, go clean the house. Just what I wanna do.
love it.
Wait, so I have a question. Did you have those words written down before, like, as your goal, or what came out of it?
What words?
The truth,
Community.
community.
I had a blank piece of paper that had connection, trust, community, and truth, and I wasn't sure how I was gonna do it.
Hmm.
I just feel like we did that without even knowing, like, you put it down on the paper and it happened, so
I know. I
That I
let
mean,
go.
we are
Yeah.
meant.
Thank you for listening to this part of the Shame Out Loud series. I wanna say thank you for listening to all the things that are so tender and so real for all of us. And Annie, thank you so much for joining us today. And Tammy, your presence is so appreciated as we walk through this series. Um, and if you want to learn more about today's guests, you can visit my website, loriclarkemedia.com, and find all the details under Shame Out Loud Part 5. And if this conversation opened something in you, the Curious Writing Companions are available at loriclarkemedia.com. Each one follows a series and offers gentle prompts and reflections. And again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following us in this series and holding our sacred conversation and life experiences so beautifully along with your own. I hope that you will join us for part 6 of this Shame Out Loud series.